officially call this meeting of the Bylaw Study Committee to order at 7:01 p.m. And I believe what we see is what we're going to get tonight. Andy said he had some lame excuse about celebrating his wife's birthday this evening. And Greg, as far as I know, is just finishing up his time in West Virginia. I know he had said he wouldn't be available for either one of our July meetings. So I think we are it. And as we are all remote as a formality, I will call the roll. Skip Courier.
Present.
Ryan Langevin.
Present.
And David Robbins is present. Andy Jefferson and Greg Marr are absent. So we will begin. As always, our first agenda item is public comment. We seem not to have any Zoom attendees, and thus no one from the public to comment unless one of the three of us has something to offer that qualifies as a public comment rather than something that's on the agenda for tonight. Hearing none, not surprised. We will proceed. Where is it? With our main agenda item, which is a continuation of discussing bylaw articles revisions that remain to be completed. On my list of items that are remaining, we know there's some work on, is Articles 19 and 20. We're waiting for Evan still. I haven't heard anything, I haven't had an update from Evan about those. I'm going to see if I can't get together with Evan next week to see where we are with those. Article 12, Section 21 on handicap parking. The Accessibility Advisory Commission is meeting this evening, presumably right now as we are meeting, to review and and give us their feedback on that, along with their feedback on the colorblind thing that we sent them a couple of weeks back. I saw Roger Trahan last week, I think, at a meeting. Happened to see him, and he said that they were about to be finished up with their work on the bylaw, and he appreciated the note we sent them on color blindness. So we'll see what feedback they have for us from their meeting tonight, and presumably we can discuss that, deal with it at our next meeting. Article 4, we had some questions for Evan and for town council. I do not have answers on that yet. I had forwarded to Evan the question about the selling of surplus property, the idea that maybe if it's $1, we probably don't need the select board's approval. Waiting to hear back from Evan, his thoughts on that. I may have to pester him a bit on that. On the questions about contracts, I've been looking that over a bit, trying to formulate the appropriate questions to ask, and I've kind of reached the point, and I've been meaning to put that together and haven't quite gotten it done. But I wanted to run that by both Evan and town council, asking in part how well these procedures, this contract handling and signing, how well that matches up with our current practices. And how we might clarify that. I did take some time to review about a dozen other towns' bylaws to see if they had anything comparable. And basically, I couldn't find any comparable provisions in other towns. It may be that we don't really need those in the bylaw. We'd like to get some confirmation from Evan. The one thing I did see in a couple of bylaws in other towns was a clause that basically said for contracts over a certain dollar amount, they must be in writing and they must be signed by the board or committee or commission that authorizes those contracts. So they're giving, some of these towns appear to be giving broader signature authority than just to the select board and school committee. We definitely want to get some follow-up on that.
Oh, David, for my 2 cents worth, that makes eminently more sense than having the selectmen have to sign each and every contract that gets made. They should be putting out a boilerplate requirement for anybody that's going to sign a contract over or under a certain dollar amount. Say you must do this, this, and this, but otherwise you follow the state procurement law and that's it.
Yeah,
That's kind of what should happen.
yeah. So I definitely want to get some follow-up from them. I think those are probably the two, at least the ones that I remember noticing, that the two open issues that we had from Article 4 of the bylaws. So we'll, I think we can, hopefully we can finish up on that at our next meeting. If I can pester Evan and Ginny, for feedback on that between now and the next meeting. So that's what I had on that. I sent out 2 updates, Article 24 scenic roads, where I basically just made some changes that were responsive to the planning board's discussion on this several weeks back. Any comments on that?
No, I not to jump to the other one, but I don't have comments in either one of them. I think they're just fine. Just pick them up, post them, and go with them.
Okay. Yeah, the other one I sent out was Article 27, the biomedical thing. That basically, I just looked at the tracking list that Brian sent out the other day and saw half a dozen or so items that were in there that I had not previously incorporated into that bylaw revision. So that's just, I just basically went by that. And unless any of us have any comments or suggestions to follow up on that, I think we can consider those 2 updates be ready to go.
Yeah, Dave, the only point I had on that one was it looked like the new edits didn't have the highlighting.
That is correct. I noticed that just after I emailed it out. So in my copy of the document, I added the proper highlighting.
Sure. Yep,
One seemed to have it, and the other one didn't, actually.
Yeah, Article 24, I did have the proper highlighting in there. And I sent those out with change tracking so you can see what's changed from the last version. But yes, when I did that Article 27, I made the changes and forgot to account for the highlighting. Like I said, I noticed that just after I sent it out. So on my Word document, I put the highlighting in as it should be.
Sure.
So with that, the other bylaw revisions we're waiting on include the Finance Committee and the Select Board. And Andy, in his email to me, said he talked to Matt and Amber earlier this week, and Article 5 is on the agenda for the next Select Board meeting, tentatively scheduled for August 8th. So hopefully we'll get some resolution on that bound book, which I think was probably the only thing in that article that we thought needed updating.
So Dave, I went looking, and there's nothing anywhere that's remotely current relative to the bound book.
Right. I'm thinking either the bound book clause simply gets eliminated, or it's somehow updated to to conform to how we keep track of the select boards, the things that used to be in the bound book way back whenever that actually existed. Is there anything current that's comparable that ought to be mentioned in there?
So any of the bound books that I ever looked at, they stopped with inkwell and quill pen.
Yeah, I am aware that in the library and in the town clerk's office, older town reports, annual town reports, are a bunch of them are collected together and bound in a hardcover book. But that's not at all what this bylaw article talks about. But that's the only bound book I've seen recently that has anything to do with town actions. So we're still waiting for, hopefully Greg will be able to get the Finance Committee to weigh in on their article. Hopefully Evan will have personnel bylaw done. He said that he expected it to be done by the end of July. And we're not quite at the end of July yet, but we're only a few days away. And then Evan's working on, Article 19. Let's see what else. Yeah, that's really it as far as the work we still have pending. The other thing relative to that is we probably ought to go through the open items on the tracking list and decide whether any of besides the ones I caught in Article 27, is there anything else that's still open, or can we consider the rest of them closed? You know, there are a few items that I had noted relative to the articles I was working on that I thought, well, yeah, we asked a question, but yeah, I think the answer is no change needed.
Yeah,
some of those haven't been reflected back in the tracking list.
right. Yeah. There's a good handful of those that are really kind of more questions that either a committee member had, or I think some of the select board feedback that we got was had some questions, things like that. So there might be things that we've either answered to ourselves as we've gone through, or things that didn't need to get documented as part of a bylaw revision. But I didn't want to take the liberty of closing them out myself. So yeah, I can share that list if I don't know if you wanted to run through.
I was going to say, I don't know whether we want to take the time to run through them this evening,
Sure.
or if we want to collect up our thoughts on those and bring that back. It depends on how much time we want to spend tonight and thinking about it. But I know there's a number of them that I could sort of go through between now and next meeting and provide my thoughts on the resolution for them.
Yeah, that's fair. And I can send out a note, especially since Andy and Greg aren't with us tonight. I haven't had many updates to the list since I sent it out, but Dave, I crossed off the few items that you had addressed as well. So I can send out the latest version and just say that, if everybody went through their assigned articles, prior to the next meeting, and either had thoughts about whether items could get closed or if further revisions are necessary, that'd be great. There's a series at the top as well that are kind of more general or intended to apply more broadly. I feel like those will probably end up being discussion points.
Yes, I think right. That we'll want to make sure we've talked about having kind of a catch-all warrant article to authorize changes, things like references to Mass General laws.
Yeah.
So I think we want to make sure that we've kind of zeroed in on that as being a place to do some of these, and that covers, I think, at least a few of those comments at the top. Yeah, we want to make sure that we put together our list of all of that kind of thing, that we're not going to go back through the text of each individual bylaw and make those changes, but we want to make sure that we've authorized those changes.
Sure.
One thing I did notice in the tracking list, there are a few open items that I think they're open because we haven't formally received feedback from the town administrator.
Yeah.
And I think with all the discussions I've had with Evan, it's probably fair to say that although he hasn't provided us in a written response, it's probably fair to say that we've gotten all the responses we're likely to get from him in terms of our going way back to where we asked all of the stakeholders to provide us with some feedback.
Yeah, that's fair. And I can mark all those closed, probably with the exception of 19 and 20, where it's not so much that he's providing feedback, he's providing a product.
Right. If the only reason it's open is because we didn't receive written feedback from the town administrator, and it's otherwise we consider it resolved, then it's probably fair to consider those closed.
Yep. Yeah, I did note that of the list, I think there's probably 70 or 80 individual items still listed as open once you ignore the status items and things like that. But the overwhelming majority of those are either related to the personnel bylaw, or there's a healthy number related to the section of Article 12 that the Accessibility Advisory Commission is taking a look at. So, those two.
Well, we should be able to mark those closed once we get the feedback from the Accessibility Advisory Commission on 12/21 and Labor Council on Article 20.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the list will come down to an even more manageable list. Yeah. Hopefully in short order.
Yep. So if there is nothing else on that agenda item, what did I have next? Identify bylaws ready for town council review. And I think at this point, probably most of what we've put up, published on the website is probably ready for review by town council. Anybody, any thoughts on that?
I agree wholeheartedly with that, in that nobody has sent anything about these things that we've posted to amend any of it. So let's kind of get them off to her to let her see them in deference to her time and commitments she might have otherwise. Just let her look at them and kind of give 2 cents worth on this stuff.
Yep, that
doesn't make any sense to keep it.
Yep, exactly. I think basically everything we've got on the website now. It just occurred to me. We had some plans to incorporate non-criminal disposition into a few articles like earth removal and house numbering and a couple of others. I didn't think about teeing those up, but yeah, I think I'll double check my list of what I sent. I know I sent out for review by Evan and the chief of police and others a list of what we had in mind for non-criminal disposition, and I think there were 4 bylaw articles that we know. I think we decided what we wanted to do, but I don't think we actually wrote the updates into those. I'll double check on that and send that out to the to all of you who had who were responsible for those articles.
Right, and I added those as action items in the tracking list for the, I think you're right, 3 or 4 articles that we hadn't incorporated it yet.
Yeah.
Dave,
so those, right. So those are probably, since we've got 2 or 3 dozen that are clearly ready for town council review, those for which we need to add non-criminal disposition, we can, we don't need to send those to council right away, but we'll have plenty of time to deal with those.
The only ones, so, and Dave, I don't know if it's worthwhile or if you're able to enable my ability to share. I had pulled together a list, just kind of summarizing status and whether there are open comments or other questions on article by article.
Yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one thing I neglected to do in preparation for tonight's meeting, was to go over that non-criminal, the non-criminal disposition things that still needed to be done.
Okay. So, and we can, for any of these with open comments, we could circle back to see whether they're significant or not. But there were a couple, and where there was really only one open comment on an item, I tried to list out what that question or comment was. So there were a couple on Article 1. Article 2, there isn't anything in the tracking list, but just thinking through myself, didn't we have a question as to whether or not we wanted to do anything with respect to the posting requirements for town meeting?
So
yes, that's still a bit of an open issue as to.
Right, that's an open item for me. That's what Candy had printed off and given to me, and unfortunately, I failed to scan them back into my computer, turn them over, and use them for scrap paper. So I've asked her to send them to me again. So we will have those for the next meeting. But I think it was more or less, that was just general guidance in essence, that we post them at someplace in the 5 different precincts. And what I had kind of sent along to her was, is there anything really, because I couldn't find anything in the law that said where you had to post this, and I think it was just a general advisory thing from a clerks group or town clerks group that you kind of put something in each of the precincts,
Sure.
as opposed to what we might have in the current bylaws and the town, reference to town meetings, whether it had even been updated from 3 precincts to 5 or not.
Sure.
Yep. Yeah, so that is somewhere farther down on my list of things. I noticed I did highlight that in red.
Yeah. And I can, I'll add that to the tracking list just so we don't lose track of it. And so 3, 4, and 5, obviously we haven't published yet. 6, there was nothing open. 7, we had some open questions. And I know, I believe the town clerk was helping us on whether or not the list of fees actually needed to be included.
All right, so I'm sorry there. I thought I had shared something with everybody that said that it really didn't have to be listed. Because Candy went to town council and they came back and said, no, just as long as they're listed someplace on her website or something. Did I send that or no?
Yeah,
I remember seeing it.
Ginny's response was that she didn't believe they had to be in the bylaws. I think, I don't know if Candy has a preference or if she's comfortable with us, assuming the committee's on this page, if we would lean towards excluding them from the bylaw. I don't know if Candy has any opposition to that.
All right, I didn't specifically ask her that. I can circle back around with her if you'd like.
Yeah, let's see if we can confirm the. Yeah, I think my preference would be if this is just sort of in general principles, and I think this falls right within that. If it doesn't need to be in the bylaw, let's keep it out of the bylaw.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pull up. Skip, you had a question on whether or not we still needed to provide paper ballots. And so I don't know if that got any resolution.
All right, so it was my recollection that Greg was kind of looking at that.
Okay.
And I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Just because he's involved with the election commission group.
So yes, I think those are the only.
All right, yeah, so that's an open thing. Yeah, it's a one way or the other.
Yeah.
So
there's 8, 9, 10, 11, I think we're fine. 12, I believe the only, well, it looks like there are a couple open questions, mainly. Yeah, I guess a few different items.
right.
So we'd probably hold off on sending 12 for now.
Yeah. I think the major item on 12 is section 21 on accessibility.
Yeah.
There was a question in 12 on section 4, I think had to do with what effectively is littering.
Yeah.
There was some question about whether that is redundant with the illicit discharge bylaw. After thinking about that, I've concluded that it's not. It's a separate thing. It's more about littering in public streets. Probably my inclination in that section 4 of Article 12, if I remember the number right, is to leave it as is. But anyway, yeah, there's that. There may be.
The outside is getting pumped up.
We'll see.
A lot more cars there, so there are people living. But honestly, we don't really see it, and at night you see a few lights. For us, it's not that there. Charles got that third building and stuff. Right in the freaking backyard.
Get some background noise. So 13, I think there's an open question from Matt often about whether or not we've had the public hearings that are called out in the article. I have a feeling that whether we have or not probably doesn't have any bearing on whether or not we want to leave that in the bylaw.
Right.
The only other open item on Article 13 was one of the ones with potential to add non-criminal disposition.
Right. Yes, we had planned to add non-criminal disposition to that. Where is mine?
And the same thing on Article 15. We don't currently have any proposed changes to 15. So the adoption of or the addition of non-criminal disposition to that would be our only change. So I guess there's probably nothing to share with town council unless we decide
Right.
to add that.
Yeah, so Article 13 and 15, we were adding non-criminal disposition. And we were adding article non-criminal disposition to 18 and 22, the Silver Lake Ripple.
Yep. Let's see. And so, yeah, really just a few others. So yeah, I'd say certainly, and Dave, I could email you this list if it's helpful. There's, I'd say certainly anything with a blank box next to it. I don't see anything as remaining open. Some of these others, and this shade tree one I actually wanted to ask you about. There's an open or a comment that I haven't cleared yet. I don't know that it's open from the planning board on.
I remember a comment on the planning board. It may have been on scenic roads, having to do with publicizing regulations or something like that. So
this one on the shade tree bylaw, the board would like to see additional outreach and reference to materials to better inform the public about work that applies and work that's exempt under the bylaw. I wasn't sure if we were intending to make any changes along those lines, or if the planning board signed off on everything at this point.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from the planning board, any feedback on the shade tree. And I think this, that's the idea of additional outreach and reference materials is probably not something that could usefully be added to the bylaw. It's more of the appropriate departments, making.
Right. That's not a bylaw change thing. That's just how people process it. And if they feel whoever's responsible for governing the shade tree bylaw need to do a different job, then they need to reach out to them.
So yeah, that's about it. The only other one, I think 21 was one of Greg's, and I don't think any of us have a Word document version of it, but we had gotten an email comment to change Historic Society to historical. That's the only incremental change that we have left to make. But I don't think any of us have a Word doc to be able to push that through until Greg gets back.
Yeah, I think we can comfortably wait for Greg to get back to take care of that one.
Yeah, and either way, I don't think this comment should hold up, us, whether or not we send it to council for review.
Right.
But anything else where there's multiple comments open, I'd probably lean towards hold, especially since they're going to be getting, at least a dozen to 20 of these. I'd say if there's anything even remotely open, it probably worthwhile to hold off until there's a final version, so she's not looking at something twice.
Yep, agreed. I think we have plenty of material to send to Ginny right away for her, to begin her reviews. She's not going to get it all done in one day or 1 week anyway. And we're not expecting that.
No.
So yeah, anything where we know we're going to be making changes, we can defer sending that to Ginny until we've gotten the changes taken care of.
Sure.
So let me see. Yeah, so I think it sounds like we're good on town council review here for kicking that off.
Yep.
And on the next agenda item, continue planning for town meeting. I don't know if we have any further thoughts today on that.
I would move that we keep them to ourselves until at least all 5 of us are here to shoot each other down.
Yeah, that's probably a fair. It's that we're not time critical on that just yet. I think we did have a fairly good discussion at our last meeting about sort of the first steps in thinking about that. There will still be some details that we have yet to work out as to exactly how that's going to be worded on the town meeting warrant. I do think one thing we want to put together is a report of the committee, which basically will be some introductory material, just explaining things like, when the committee was formed, who was on the committee, what we did, what our objectives were, all the meetings we had, and blah, blah, blah. You just sort of something general like that. And then to include in the committee's report every one of these bylaw articles in the format that we've been publishing them.
Yeah.
Sort of just to basically take all that, collect it together in one big report. And beyond that, I imagine we may come up with some additional details, but that's sort of generally the way I'm thinking about the formal report of the committee.
Yeah, one other piece, and I'll just lob this out there for future discussion, because I'd agree with Skip. I think we've all shared some of our thoughts around town meeting planning at our last meeting, so might as well wait for Greg and I can't remember if Andy was still with us for all of that discussion last time or not, but in terms of the report, I know early on we had kind of kicked around the idea of whether or not it makes sense to have some sort of standing committee, and if we decide to make any sort of recommendation along those lines, the report would likely be our opportunity to do that. So
Yep.
if there was an appetite for reopening that discussion.
Yeah, that's probably something that is in my notes of something that sort of some longer term considerations that it will no doubt be worth at least mentioning in our report. We may, as planned, we may complete our work and consider our committee dissolved at or right after town meeting. We've done the job we were tasked to do, but there is where we have had discussions about some follow-on.
So to simplify that, I might propose that we simply add another bylaw saying that there shall be a bylaw change review committee that meets and discusses any proposed bylaw changes.
Yep, we could consider that.
It would kind of seem to take care of the issue, unless we wanted to get somebody else to actually do that, such as the Warrant Advisory Committee.
Mm-hmm. I want to say I remember somewhere in one of the town bylaws that I've reviewed for various purposes, I want to say I remember seeing some sort of a standing bylaw committee in one town somewhere. I'll have to dig through and see if see if that's really what I'm remembering.
Well, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I know we've had this discussion, touched on this a number of times, that we're seeing in our review of the existing bylaws, we're seeing a number of indications that things that wouldn't have had to be corrected if we had had some sort of consistent review as bylaws are added and amended. So, I think however we end up deciding to do it, I think we will want to address that topic at least briefly, at least in the report, if not in the form of a recommended addition to the bylaws. But yeah, we don't have to nail that down tonight, but we do want to keep it in mind. The other thing that you mentioned, I think you brought up, I think at the last meeting, Brian, in terms of looking forward, and one thing we really haven't touched on is the idea of a noise bylaw.
Yeah.
We were requested to look at that. I think we had a request from a couple of sources to look at that. At this stage of the game, I don't know that we have time to give proper attention to that.
Yeah, the quickest answer would obviously be if there was a town, and I don't know if I think you're right. I believe the police chief and I think it was the planning board that also had similar thoughts, or at least a suggestion that we think about it. Unless one of those two has seen a bylaw that either they know from experience or through others' feedback, seems to work pretty well. And we could tailor that slightly to fit Grafton. I think pulling something together completely from scratch, I agree, it's probably too late in the game. But if there was some sort of template out there that, others had some level of confidence and comfort with, making slight tweaks to make it Grafton specific wouldn't be an incredible lift, but.
Yeah, the chief did send along for our consideration the town of Pepperell's noise bylaw.
Yeah.
And that's one I was looking at that the other day and I thought, there's a fair amount to like in that, but I'm not sure that I would just want to adopt that as is for Grafton. I kind of think that a noise bylaw might be worth sort of taking up, separately as something that's not part of our bylaw review. I know we've generally have said that we're willing to add new stuff to the bylaw. The concept of a noise bylaw and a lot of the details around that is probably something that merits some discussion, a fair amount of consideration, really focused on that topic. And it might end up working better if we did not try to include that in our work.
Yeah, agreed.
It's been a source of noise, has been a source of some controversy in this town over the last couple of years, and I don't know that there's an easy answer. I remember seeing on the Massachusetts planners mailing list a while back the topic of noise bylaws came up, and someone there referred to Worcester's noise bylaw as being something they thought was particularly good. At the time I saw that, I took a quick look at Worcester's noise bylaw, and it's really something that's tailored for a city environment, not for a town environment. So while it may be good for Worcester, it didn't look like the kind of thing addressing the kinds of noise issues that we will see, that we would ever be likely to see in Grafton, until such time as Grafton becomes a city of 150,000 people, which might happen 100 or 200 years from now, but in the foreseeable future, Grafton is not going to be like that.
Dave, you have to admit that introducing a noise bylaw and publicizing the fact that it's being introduced would probably be one way to garner some additional public comment.
I'm sure that would, without a doubt, and that's partly why I kind of think that, it's the nature of that topic suggests that it really, should be a primary focus of whatever board or committee or working group tackles it. So
and we could always include in our report the fact that this was proposed and that, given the volume of other work that the committee had on its plate, we didn't feel we had sufficient time to adequately consider it.
Yeah, right. I think that's a good point, that in our report, it would be very good to acknowledge the request for a noise bylaw, and acknowledge that that's a need that a fair number of people in Grafton see. It's just that for the reasons we've talked about, and we felt it was best addressed in a more focused on that topic. Yeah, good.
Outside the scope of our review of the 20 years worth of no
Yeah.
reviews.
Yes, we will emphasize that too in our report, that we're catching up on 20 years worth of bylaw reviews. All righty. Anything else on town meeting planning for now? Really, I think it will be more productive for all five of us to engage in that and really start to nail things down. So with that, then, the last agenda item we have is to review the previous meeting minutes of June 29th and July 13th.
I move that we accept both as written.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion of the motion? Hearing none. I'll have to take a roll call vote. Skip.
Aye.
Brian.
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously.
And Dave, just quickly before we get to the last item, I don't know if we wanted to spend a minute thinking about scheduling into August. I know I could have a conflict if we stuck with the second and fourth. I'll be traveling during the second Thursday. There's a very good chance I might be able to attend remotely, but I can't guarantee that at this point. And for things like the town meeting planning and those discussions, I'd say I was able to chime in on those last time around and some additional thoughts tonight. So I certainly don't think you would have to hold up that conversation if I'm the only one that's not there. But
yeah, I'll send a note around to all of us, and let's find out what our availability is collectively for August. I mean, we've got our standard meeting schedule, second and fourth Thursdays. Obviously, we need to have at least one meeting in August, is almost as soon as possible, because we got a few things nailed down. But let's see what we're all available for. I'm certainly flexible to meet weeks other than the second and fourth.
Sure.
So let's find a time. Ideally, we can find a time when all five of us can get together in the room and hash some things out. We're getting close to being done with our work.
Yeah.
Can't slack off now. We got to finish it. I sometimes have this tendency to, I'm almost done, and then I kind of forget about it. Then all of a sudden the deadline is there, and oops. Try to wrap things up. I think right now the most, we've got a few things that we know are coming back to us, and we can get town council started with her review, which I think is really important to get her going on that, because we pretty much have to have everything nailed down in early September. Okay, so we'll leave our August meeting schedule slightly open to try to fit into everybody's schedules. Summer is always difficult. People like to go away in the summer, or various things going on. So anyway, so that's good. And with that, I suppose a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. Motion is not debatable. Roll call vote. Skip.
Aye.
Brian.
Aye.
And Dave votes aye. Motion carried unanimously. We are adjourned.